Welcome to Formula One Espresso News, brought to you from a very warm shed this week. It is absolutely roasting here in the UK. We're like having the height of our summer. Yeah, for me, I ain't going to make this too long because I don't think I can survive in the shed for much longer than 30 minutes. So let's get into what I've got for you. F1 expansion plans. Then we've got James Vowles and his Williams future, the F1 movie, George Russell potential move to Aston Martin, and of course, that flashpoint from the Canadian Grand Prix between Lando, Norris and Oscar Piastri. So, if that takes your fancy, we've got 30 minutes. Do me a quick favour before I pass out. Hit that like, subscribe, follow button, whatever is available to you on the platform you're listening to, because this is Formula One Espresso News, brought to you by Coffee Corner Motorsport, 4 Beans the podcast, bringing you the latest from the paddock to the podcast via a very warm shed this week. So, grab your coffee or your soft drink or just any water so you don't pass out. And let's get into it. Right, Formula One expansion plans. Now, we've seen the calendar. We've talked about this for the past couple of weeks on the podcast. And we know that next year we will lose 2 tracks, of course, in Barcelona and the Dutch Grand Prix after 2026. So they've both got another season, which is what's on the calendar, and then they disappear. So naturally, Formula One will replace these 2 tracks because Formula One like to get their full quota of 24 races. The Concord Agreement actually allows you to do 25 races. But as it stands, Formula One, well, certainly the teams more than Formula One themselves, have no desire to go above the 24 that we've currently got on the Formula One calendar. So we will be seeing replacements for, of course, these 2 tracks. There is some muted talk of potentially trying to bring back something like Imola or something like Turkey. But we know the big money is obviously in South Africa and Thailand at the moment with regards to a bid for Formula One. Now, of course, a tight window makes it a little bit more difficult in terms of getting somebody back on the grid or at least getting somebody up to speed. But we know that with these 2 circuits dropping off, Formula One have got enough time to bring them on. Now, this week, there was some news from both South Africa and from Thailand, which may have a bearing on the calendar, as it seems they're bidding for places. Maybe both of them will come on board in 2027. Maybe it's just destined that one of them. But as we know that Formula One like their global expansion, there's a lot of desire to return to South Africa and, of course, a lot of desire to go to Thailand. But let's get into the Thailand bid. So the Thailand bid is a joint government bid along with the promoters. It's a 1.2 billion 5-year bid, I believe it was, for, I think it's being termed as a Bangkok night street race. It's backed by the government and corporate investment. Stefano Dominicalo has obviously visited Thailand. We know that the Thailand Prime Minister has been visiting the paddock quite a lot. We know that this is a deal that is very much in the final place in terms of an agreement done. And there's a lot of talk about this, getting this one over the line. A lot of talk of this one being a real possibility now. With regards to South Africa, we know, I'm going to say this wrong, and I apologise for the South African contingent who follow me. Kailami, I want to say. I've probably said that wrong, so I genuinely apologise. I don't know how to pronounce it, so we're just going to go to South Africa for the time being in the hope that I haven't offended too many people with that complete butchering of that. But they've obviously been given grade 1 status by the FIA, so they've got basically a 3-year deadline to upgrade the track to make it a grade 1 track. We're talking, I think, mainly around extended runoff areas, updated safety barriers I've got down here, modernised paddock and pit lane infrastructure, race control, medical facilities. The circuit itself is pretty much what they deem as F1 ready, although from what I've seen from some fans, that's debatable in terms of the quality racing you'll get there. But what they're saying is there's nothing major in terms of the specification to the track that's needed. It's all around these other areas of it. So that makes it a very quick sort of upgrade, if that makes sense, to bring it up to speed and ready to host a Formula One race. We know there's a lot of the politics behind all of these races, not just South Africa, but Thailand as well. So we know there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. There's a lot around getting teams in that country, a lot of around infrastructure and getting fans to the track. So it's not just a case of actual, we've got a racetrack and it's ready. There's a lot of stuff that goes into these decision making when Formula One make this. They like this new sort of idea where you can get in and out of a city. We've talked about this on the podcast as well previously. So a lot of talk about how easy it is to access the track, how easy it is to get in and out is an advantage to putting it in the city, because actually that boosts local tourism, local businesses. That tends to have a lot more sway, especially with promoters, because it means they can tap into local government funding as well as not have to put on a lot of facilities themselves, because the local businesses around the track are actually doing it for them. So that's a big win-win for the promoters of a Formula One track, who don't have to do that. Whereas if you go to like a Silverstone in Imola, which is a standalone circuit, then actually a lot of time and effort has to go in on the promoter's behalf, as well as cost. Let's be honest, that's a major factor in this, to make sure that the fans have an all-round experience, where actually if you can get away without doing that and bringing involved local businesses, local government funding, you can see it's a lot easier. And then that also allows Formula One to charge a lot more money and get a lot more revenue for it. So you can see why they do this. But in terms of everything else, realistically, South Africa could be ready by 2027 if there's no politics getting in the way. Thailand would be a lot more difficult, but then we've seen Las Vegas, we've seen Hungaroring improvements that's been made. With the right sort of plan, that you can get this on track and you can get it going with certainly by 2028 at the latest. So these bids probably now need a decision on what's going on with them, and Formula One probably needs to start looking at the replacement for these two tracks. And I think with the two going, it kind of opens up potentially one or both of these to come onto the Formula One calendar. Really intrigued to know. I know there's a lot of clamour to go racing again in South Africa. I know that a lot of fans want to see it, and it's somewhere where we've been talking about going for absolute ages. I know Lewis Hamilton talks about it, and the idea being that we travel all over the world but still don't go back to South Africa has been a big stumbling block in terms of the Formula One global expansion. So I wouldn't actually be surprised to see both of these make an appearance on 2027. Certainly South Africa, if we can get it ready in terms of an agreement, and obviously what's going on in terms of who's paying for government infrastructure, that side of things. I don't know what the infrastructure is like. I don't know if there's any improvements that need to be made on that front in terms of South Africa. So whether or not it's just a simple upgrade the track or not, it sounds very simple, doesn't it? Yeah, we just do the runoff areas, we do the paddock building. But if you've got to do that infrastructure and stuff as well, it makes it a little bit more complicated. So really intrigued to know your views on that one. So drop a view in the comments over where you think we could go racing and where you think we should go racing. It's a big debate, but we've got a real opportunity with two races opening up where we do. A lot of people talked about going back to Malaysia. A lot of people have talked about going back to Germany. Turkey seems a very popular venue that's dropped off and could come back on. So actually, there's a lot of talk around what tracks do we either bring back or do we go to in terms of Formula One in 2027, with an opportunity, the first time in a long time, with two races leaving the Formula One calendar. So really intrigued to know your views on that one. Right. James Vowles and Williams' future. So it's obviously James Vowles' birthday today. So happy birthday to James Vowles. He celebrated with a new long-term contract with Williams. The first thing to note with this one, there is no length in terms of the public announcement to this contract. So we haven't been told how long this contract's been done for. It's being deemed by both parties as a multi-year long-term deal. That's the only information we've got from Williams. No talk of money, no talk of how long it's for. It seems to be a popular trend at the moment, not actually releasing the details behind the contracts in terms of how long they're expected to stay on for. But basically, it's no surprise if you're one, a Williams fan, or two, a Formula One fan. Rise of Williams has been well documented recently. James Vowles is one of the most eloquent people you can listen to talking about the rise of Williams, and he's backed it up, fifth in the championship, 55 points, more points than the previous 3 seasons combined. Absolutely stunning start to the season. Obviously got Carlos and Alex Albon on board currently. We know they've put a lot of effort into 2026 and the new regulations. We know they're talking about that as being a real turning point for the Williams journey. James Vowles has obviously been a big part of that. We know there's investment plan for Grove. Again, previous listeners to the podcast, that won't come as a surprise. So we know that Williams are heading in the right direction. Obviously a fantastic racing pedigree, a fantastic heritage. And it's one where everyone wants to see Williams do well. I think if you're a Formula One fan, everyone wants to see this sleeping giant being woken up from its slumber and get towards the front of the Formula One grid once again. So I think this was news that wasn't unexpected in terms of James Vowles' long-term future. There's muted talk, obviously, that when Toto goes, that he will look at going to Mercedes as a team principal. I think that option is still there, but I think Toto's quite happy to stay in that role currently. I think when Toto kind of steps back as a team principal, he's obviously got the capacity to step back as an owner, but I also think that he would potentially just sell his stake and just go off into the sunset. I think that's something he would do. But yeah, with regards to James Vowles, there is a report saying that he's turned down other team approaches to stay, which makes you wonder where that is. The most obvious contenders probably are Aston Martin would be one I'd say. It's probably sounded him out. I'm not too sure Ferrari would. A lot of sort of speculation over Fred Vasseur in his future. Like I say, I don't see Mercedes making a change at the moment unless it was a very basic conversation over what's your contract status at Williams, because we're intrigued if Toto was looking at a step back. But we hear that quite often in things. We come on to that with George Russell as well, in terms of, sometimes the team or the driver, or even in this case the team principals, representatives will put it out there that other people are involved. So it kind of closes the market off and kind of rushes whoever you're trying to negotiate with into signing the contract, and kind of, strong arms you into it and gets the deal done quicker. So it could also just be a bit of speculation on that one. Red Bull, I suppose, with Christian Horner one. All of these teams would probably love to have a James Vowles in there, let's be honest about it. So I think that in terms of a demand, he's definitely in demand. But whether or not these teams have backed that with an official approach, or whether or not it's just talk to get his new contract done, it's kind of irrelevant at this point. He's committed to Williams, and very passionate speech in the race space with, of course, the Williams team owners. They've really surprised me when they came on board. They obviously brought it from Claire Williams and the Williams family. A lot of talk that they were just investment capitalists, just there to make their money and run. They've actually come up with a really long-term plan, real stability to the team. Obviously helped with the modern boom in Formula One, but actually they've done really well in terms of backing James Vowles, backing what his plans are, backing that they need long-term strategy and investment. And they've kind of put their money where their mouth is and secured James. So I'm absolutely delighted for it. When I grew up, Williams were at their heyday, winning championships left, right and centre. I love the fact that we've got a team which is built from nothing, a family-run team. I know it's not a family-run team now, but that sort of team that was built to kind of compete with the big guns of Formula One. Reminds me of Red Bull when they burst on the scene. And maybe that's why people like these teams, because they're the underdogs, aren't they? But I, for one, would like to see Williams back on the podium, seeing James Vowles and the team celebrate. And one thing I will say, what an amazing performance from the mechanical team to get Alex Albon's car back up and running for qualifying. Obviously in Canada, once that engine cover blew off, to get that fixed, and then his qualifying performance was pretty amazing. I know he didn't obviously finish the race because he retired, but ultimately, what a great performance in the heat of the battle. Helped, of course, by the red flag, but actually getting that back on track and allowing him to qualify. Absolutely, hats off to the Williams team for turning that one around. But James Vowles, long-term future secure at Williams. Great news if you're a Williams fan, and I also think great news if you're a Formula One fan. But again, drop in the comments what you think of that one. F1 movie, we've got to talk about it. I've not seen it yet. We're going to see it on Monday. Dad and I are going to the IMAX on Monday and one of the fan first screenings. We were due to go to London, but then they opened up other ones and we've got one closer to home. So we're going there to see it. So I can't tell you about the storyline. I can guess the storyline from what I've seen so far. I don't think it's fairly obvious. There's a few things I will say. If you are a pure racing fan, you're going to pick up everything that's wrong with this film, because there will be things wrong with this film. It's a bit like when Top Gun and Maverick come out. If you're an aviation pilot, I'm sure you looked at Top Gun and thought, we don't do that in the Navy. And I think this is going to be the same if you're a Formula One fan. I think you're going to look at it and go, that ain't true. That ain't true representation. It's a film. Yeah, first and foremost, it's a film. It's to open up Formula One to a market that hasn't seen Formula One. Yes, it's a dangerous game because it's going to open up to a market where everyone thinks it's like the film, a bit like Drive to Survive. That's the danger behind it. People think it's like these drama programs, and it's not all the time. So there is a danger and a risk of that. But I'm sure Formula One don't actually, sort of care too much about that. But we know it's going on for, is it 3 years now? 2, 3? It's got to be 3 years now. It was filmed during race weekends. There was obviously Las Vegas. There was, I think Zandvoort was in there, Monza, Silverstone. All of these sort of places hosted Formula One when they were actually doing the races. And we saw obviously the Apex GP garages up there. We saw Brad Pitt join the drivers' parade. We saw all these things happen. So there should be a bit of authenticity to it. But I expect some drama as well because it's a film ultimately. Lewis Hamilton, as we know, executive producer. It's part of his new film company set up in conjunction with obviously Apple as well. So expect it to be heavily plugged. We're seeing a massive amount of media behind this one. It's designed to grow the fan base, especially in the US. That's what it's done for. So, like I said, if you're a pure racing fan, take it with a pinch of salt that you've got to take it with a film. It's fiction. It's a film. We know Brad Pitt at 50 wouldn't be driving a Formula One car. But saying that, Fernando Alonso's running him close, so actually you could probably argue that one. But yeah, you get what I mean. It's based on the back of Drive to Survive. It's based on a different market to the fans who are already in it. There's already sort of stuff we're seeing about it in terms of storyline. There's stuff that's wrong with it in terms of female representation and what they've done with storyline for that one. All really valid points. It's a real shame that they've done that because they had a great opportunity to actually do some things better. And it does make me wonder where you've got Lewis Hamilton as executive producer, how much influence he actually had. Because when you see some of the comments, you kind of expect Lewis and the sort of work he's done for Mission 44, you kind of go, actually, how did that make the final cut in terms of aligning with his vision? So I do wonder how much influence he did have. We know it's got Martin Brundle and Crofty doing commentary to add it to make it a bit more authentic. So there's that on there as well, which is always good. But for me, I think it's one of those ones. I'm going to enjoy seeing cars in the IMAX. I'm going to enjoy seeing what they've done with the CGI. I saw a thing actually on Apple on one of their shows the other day, and it really wound me up. And I don't mean this negatively, but they were talking about the car and how it's been modified to, show what it's done with the filming, how the cameras was done. And they had someone on there who had no idea about the car. We all know it's like a modified Formula 2 car done by Mercedes. We all know the stuff that's gone on and put into place. And then what I saw on this clip basically was someone who didn't know anything about the car trying to talk about the car, and it was just wrong. And for me, it was just really frustrating that they could have got someone with a bit more fan knowledge, a bit more car knowledge, and a bit more research into how the car came about, how it was developed, how it was designed to be a Formula 2 car that was converted, how it was then CGI'd into the main film to look like a Formula 1 car, how they did the camera angles in terms of the full CGI scan, and then they use real footage and put it in that way. There was so much more they could have done with it as a piece to kind of show you the technology involved in making this, because ultimately some of the shots we're seeing are pretty amazing in terms of how close they got to the action. And you kind of hope that the broadcast channel have looked at this and gone, actually, could we make racing a lot more accessible by using some of this technology in it? I know having two modified F2 cars running around the track with a camera crew is very different to an actual Formula 1 race. But you kind of hope that with some of the tech that's gone into it, some of the advancements that's been made, some of the things that Apple have put into place, that actually maybe Formula 1 can look at some of that and go, do you know what? That looks really great. Can we do that and bring it to live broadcast? I think that'd be a really powerful thing to see. We know there's a lot of talk about, obviously, Apple Vision Pro, Apple potentially buying the rights for Formula One in America. We know that's out to pastures in 2026. I believe the current deal with ESPN runs out, and ESPN don't look willing to pay what Formula One want for it. It seems like Formula One are being very over-optimistic with how much they can get for the media rights in America for Formula One based on the boom. ESPN playing hardball. Apple are looking to sneak in. There's a few other contenders as well. Now, if this film does well, don't be surprised to suddenly see Apple talking about whether or not they can buy the rights for Formula One, which would be disappointing, I think, if you're a US customer, because potentially that might dictate where you see it, and you might end up behind a paywall, a bit like we are in the UK with Sky Sports, which is obviously a big concern with people, because even though people in the UK like Sky Sports coverage, there is quite a few of us who'd like to switch to the F1 coverage every once in a while if we could, but obviously we can't. So I don't want to see that for other people. It's not something I'm a fan of. I think we should be able to choose how we view Formula One, whether or not it's through F1 TV, through Sky. You should be able to pick and choose how you watch it. It is a big frustration of mine. Multi-viewer, you have to set up VPN, do a workaround. It's just really long-winded, really annoying. So yeah, I would like to see something on that. But Formula One movie, expect a full review next week. We'll give you a full review on what we thought of it. We'll give you a full review on was it any good. But like I say, if you're a hardcore racing fan, don't read too much into it, please. Just enjoy it for what it is. It's a night out with the popcorn, and it's a chance to watch Formula One cars on track in an IMAX theatre, which actually, sound-wise, should be pretty damn good. George Russell to Aston Martin. I put this one on because I saw this originally as a bit of a rumour, but then it started running with a couple of more sources, and then I kind of thought, actually, even though I don't comment too many times on rumours because I find it a bit of a waste of time, I thought I would try and do my best with this one. So we obviously know George won the Canadian Grand Prix. We know he's looking for a new Mercedes deal. That is George's number one deal on the table. That's what he wants. Let's make no mistake about it. George Russell is very keen to carry on with his Mercedes program. He feels he's done enough. He feels he's leading the team. He feels he's stepped in since obviously he became Lewis's teammate, and then obviously since Lewis gone. We know in terms of performance-wise, he was very close to Lewis, even beating him. So George is kind of staking his state to say, I've done enough to be, the team leader at Mercedes. I've stepped up. I'm helping Kimi, not just with his mass exam, I'm helping him actually on the track. And actually, I should be there for Mercedes. Now, that's what he's saying publicly. Paddock insiders, their talk about it's basically media chatter for leverage, as I said, a bit like the James Vowles deal. It feels very much like they're using it to sort of say, actually, can we get this contract over the line and get it done? We know that Toto wants Max Verstappen. We know it feels like Toto's waiting for Max to sort of say no to Mercedes before he commits to George. This is frustrating George and George's camp. They feel they should have enough. So it's really intriguing to know where this one goes. I'm really intrigued to see, actually, can they get this one over the line? Because ultimately, both parties want a deal done, but Toto seems to only want to do it if Max says no. So I don't know at what point does Toto give up on Max once again. We know that this happened last year as well. Toto likes 1-2 year deals. Realistically, I've said this before on the live, I think that Max will stay at Red Bull for another season. I think they'll try and give George a season. Could I see him going to Aston Martin? Absolutely. I mean, he fits the brand perfectly in terms of replacing Fernando Alonso if they can't get Max. He's obviously great for the marketing ability of Aston Martin. You can imagine the adverts now, couldn't you? George with his Aston Martin Vantage stood there, and all of the marketing that would go with having a British driver at a British icon like Aston Martin. So you could see exactly where they're going with the marketing. If that happened, that would mean that pretty much Max is going to Mercedes. For that move to happen, I strongly believe that one. If Max goes there, who replaces Max? Curveball, someone said, does then Oscar Piastri go into Red Bull as a number one driver based on the fallout with obviously McLaren and Lando, which we talk about on the next part of the podcast? It's a possibility with the Mark Webber connection and being a number one driver. Absolutely, I see that one happening. I think that one's going to blow up in terms of Lando and Oscar. And Charles Leclerc, if Ferrari can't get their act together, there's another option for him. So I could see it happening in the sense of it would be an option. But I think publicly and privately, he wants to stay with Mercedes. But I think they're all waiting on Max to make his decision on whether or not he leaves Red Bull before that contract signed. So I think once Toto gets a word that Max is saying no, expect that George Russell 2-year deal to follow very swiftly, or maybe even a 1+1 year deal, similar to what they did with Lewis, just in terms of keeping their options open if Max becomes available at the end of 2026. But as it stands, I think it's more paddock speculation than a fact that George Russell is going to Aston Martin. But likewise, who would not want to team up with Adrian Newey, especially as he's got a new simulation driver that they've got in from Red Bull to help with that one in terms of the correlation they got there. They've brought a new aero designer in. They've obviously got people coming in left, right and centre. So Aston Martin suddenly becomes a very attractive proposition. Top of the range facilities, if they can get on top of that, get all the correlation sorted. We saw what difference it made to McLaren once they got their wind tunnel properly up and running, and once they made a real impact. Aston Martin hoping that Adrian can work his magic, have the same effect. And what driver wouldn't want the opportunity potentially to do that? So I think George is being very clever, not shutting indoors. I think he's being clever, making it acutely aware that he could go somewhere else so that Mercedes know that actually there's other people looking around. I think George's camp is doing a great job of that one. So personally, I think it will be Mercedes if Max says no. But don't be surprised if Max drags his feet, then maybe someone like Aston Martin might just snoop in and get the deal done on the basis of they can offer a lot of money and they get to secure George Russell as a replacement for Fernando Alonso, who would then move into an ambassador role. Interesting times ahead. And one I could see could certainly pay out if Mercedes are caught sleeping. Then we're going to finish off because my word, this shed is hot. Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, McLaren Flashpoint in Canada. Now, we know they obviously collided in the Canadian Grand Prix. Andrea Stella called it an unacceptable position. Lando held his hands up and apologised. He had a 5-second penalty, no penalty points, which no one, not even I, can explain. So I'm really sorry, but I have no explanation to why Lando Norris didn't get any penalty points. Genuinely, I don't understand. I know why he got a penalty and why that time was added onto his race time because he'd done over 90% of the race. But in terms of an offence and no penalty points, sorry, I've got nothing on that one. Apart from inconsistent stewards, and can we have professional stewards, please, as we keep saying on the podcast. Now, as we know, team orders don't currently exist. Papaya rules was put into place last year, but that was more of around a basic understanding of you don't take each other out. It wasn't an actual, this is what we're going to do. It was more of a general set of rules to make sure that what happened in Montreal doesn't actually happen on the track. We know they're reluctant to pick a number one driver because both contracts have got it in there that they have equal standing. We know that McLaren like to play the game of not having a number one driver till the other one's technically out of it. I get it, but we've seen it in the past. I said in the past, having two number one drivers does not work, period. Yes, it's great for the constructors having two strong drivers getting points, but it's only great if you finish a race. You only get points if you finish a race. Lando got none at the weekend, and he almost took Oscar out in the same breath with that move as well. And if you'd done that, and McLaren got no points, and that happens 3 or 4 times later on in the season, the Constructor Championship that suddenly was looking so secure suddenly looks very different if you're McLaren. So what I will say is, whilst it is a racing incident that Norris got frustrated, we saw that Oscar got frustrated, tucked in behind Kimi. Lando got frustrated, tucked in behind Oscar. You couldn't overtake. People were just using batteries instead of, obviously, DRS to counteract it. It was really bad overtaking in terms of the track itself. We said this about Montreal. If it's not raining, actually it defaults to quite a boring track. There's only a couple of places you could overtake. Where Lando tried wasn't there. I think it's just, a bit like we saw with Max in Spain before, pure frustration, faster car, better strategy in terms of being left with the better tyres, couldn't get past and got frustrated and made a mistake. It's as simple as that. I don't think we need to psychoanalyze it too much. I don't think it's Lando can't handle it. I think it's just pure frustration. He wanted to get past Oscar, then wanted to go after Charles Leclerc and George and Max and get more points on the board and try and close that gap to Oscar. But ultimately, it's his own fault for his poor qualifying as well. So you got to take that into account. I do think that with regards to McLaren, I think they messed up in terms of their setup. I think they were trying new stuff on the track. And it kind of felt like they were being a bit big-headed, that they could bring new parts to just test in free practice 1. I think that caught them out. I think it was a mistake on their part. They should have concentrated on getting race setup. They certainly didn't have that, and I think they paid the price for it, certainly in calendar. I think that if they got their qualifying better and their setup better, they would naturally qualified higher up, and they probably would have been in contention for the win. But as they were, they just couldn't find a way past Kimi Antonelli. He just saved his battery and dropped it at the same time that Oscar Piastri had DRS, and he just counteracted him. But we know both drivers were on long-term contracts. The harmony between the two, if this carries on, will be tested and could crack. It's as simple as that. At the moment, it's all fine. At the moment, it's okay. It would have been very different, like I said, if Oscar had been collected and been taken out. So I do believe it is eggshells, and I think that there's going to be more of this, especially whilst McLaren publicly at least refuse to pick a number one driver. Who that number one driver should be, I don't really know. I think Oscar's probably performing more consistent than Lando, but I think on his day, Lando can still get race wins and can still challenge. So I don't know where you go with this in terms of just going, we're going to pick one and do it. I wouldn't like to be McLaren. And we said this is a problem they're going to have. Toto's talked about it. He had this problem, obviously, with Lewis and Nico Rosberg. Yeah, actually, when they're Valtteri Bottas, it was very simple. Valtteri just picked at the wins when Lewis was qualifying further down the grid or had problems and couldn't pick up the win. So that's kind of what McLaren need. It was the same when Checo was at his height with obviously Red Bull. We know that Checo was picking up the wins when Max didn't, which was great for the constructors. So as I say, clear number one drivers has been the preferred sort of term over Formula One over the last few years in terms of the successful teams. Very rare does it last more than one season if you've got two drivers going for the championship and then you don't implement team orders. It's normally fine for like 2-3 seasons max. And then you have a big problem with that one. So I think both drivers know it's their best chance to win a championship. Both drivers know they got pretty much the best car on the grid in terms of what we've seen so far. And I think neither driver wants to miss out on the chance to be Formula One driver world champion. So whilst they're conscious of the team game and win the constructors, I also think there's an element of they want to get the job done and they know it's their best opportunity so far to win a World Drivers' Championship. So my thoughts on this, they need a number one driver. And I think that maybe as we go into summer break, whoever's leading as we hedge into summer break, maybe that's the time to say, actually, we've had half a season. That's all you're getting. Whoever's in front, they're going to get top priority. And then if someone else comes back into the frame because of reliability issues or crashing out, so be it. But ultimately, I think whoever heads into the summer break, by the time we get to Zandvoort, McLaren need to say for at least for the rest of this season, that's our number one driver. That's where we're going. Right, and that's pretty much it for 30 minutes in the sauna shed. Apologies if you're watching on YouTube, because you can probably see the literally beads of sweat dripping from me currently. It's not a pleasant experience, I must admit. In the UK, we don't get hot weather, and when we do, we're certainly not equipped for it. So apologies to anyone watching on YouTube. If you are listening to this on Spotify, then happy days, because you haven't got to watch me absolutely bake in the shed. But once again, really appreciate you all dropping in. Really appreciate you all following the podcast. If you haven't already, please hit that follow button in terms of the podcast, or like or subscribe if you can. It really helps boost your profile. The Coffee Corner Motorsport website, which is www.coffeecornermotorsport.com, is now over 10,000 hits on it. Articles are being updated pretty much daily on there where I can. We're not just Formula One, there's Formula 2, there's IndyCar, there's F1 Academy, there's Formula E on there as well. So there's lots on there. So I really appreciate the support and help with that one. It doesn't go unnoticed, and I certainly have noticed the people heading over there to read the articles. So thank you for supporting that one. I really appreciate it. That's all from me. I'm going to go and take a cold shower and cool off. 30 minutes. You've been listening to Coffee Corner Motorsport, Four Wheels of Podcast. This is, of course, Formula One Espresso news. Don't forget to hit that like, follow, subscribe button to be notified when the next episode will drop. And I will catch you next week with my F1 the movie review, which I'm going to go see on Monday. So have a good one, everyone.